So we're getting down to the end of it. This is chapter 4, section 4. There basically are only 2 more things for us to talk about in this chapter and in this class. So I'm feeling like you're probably feeling like it's time to get this over with. So I'm going to do today just based on the information on the problem. I'm not going to do a lot of times pivoting, so I just want to explain what's going on when you start the problem and how you get your answer. So all the work then I've just got sort of written down here for you to see what it is that I'm doing with that. And so you can look at those and see if you can evaluate what you did to get that. But I'm going to work on problem number 1, page 324. And I'm looking on page 323, which has a list of instructions for you on how to work the problems in this section. The only difference basically between this section and the sections before is that sometimes they have minimizes and sometimes they have maximizes. The pivoting for the simplex method always has to deal with less than or equal to. So if it doesn't say less than or equal to, you're going to have to take a few minutes. You're going to have to make something happen so that it does say less than or equal to, and that it does actually follow the information in the problem. The other thing that we know is that in a simplex method, you have to use a maximum. So first thing I notice on problem number 1, it says minimize. So what do? I use z equals 2x minus 5y, and again, I'm not using those little x sub 1, x sub 2's. And I'm going to change that to a maximized problem. I'm going to use a different variable, w. You can use whatever variable you want, just don't use z again. So w would equal to then the negative of that, which would be negative 2x plus 5y. So then what do I do with that? I take and I rewrite 4x plus 3y is less than or equal to 120 with my slack variables. The next one is 2x plus y is less than or equal to 50. And then I have to decide where to pivot. So I would pivot on the 3. Well, I would make this first line here. And then I get my zeros. And that would give me this answer for my tableau. Now, once I have my tableau, then I know that I have w is equal to 200. So what does that mean for z? That means that z would be negative 200 for a minimum. And my values for x would be 0, and my value for y would be 40. Okay. Question number 6 just says set up the tableau, and it has a less than or equal to sign on the first one. It has a greater than or equal to sign on the 144. So what do I have to do? I have to negatize each one of those, or make each part of it negative and flip the greater than or equal to sign to a less than or equal to sign. Same thing happens on the 122. I've got to make that, instead of positive 6, I've got to make that a negative 6. Instead of positive 8, I need to make that a negative 8. Instead of positive 3, I need to make that a negative 3. Sorry, that's not a 13 there. That's a negative 3. And we're going to make that, instead of a positive 122, we're going to make that a negative 122. And it does say maximize, so I'm going to make that negative 15x minus 23 x sub 2 minus 7x sub 3 equals z. Okay, so then let's try that in long form. Question number 23. It says on question number 23, and again, I've sort of got it all written out here for you. You can sort of go through it. I just did the simple values here. Question number 23, it has maximize, so 6x plus 4y. It has 3x plus 2y is less than or equal to 60. That's good. It has 2x plus 3y is greater than or equal to 24, so I had to rewrite that as negative 2x minus 3y is less than or equal to negative 24. And here's the other thing on number 23. It has an equal to problem. So I have to make that into its two separate ones. In order for it to be equal to, it would have to be greater than or equal to 25, and at the same time, less than or equal to 25. And the less than sign then has to be written as negative x minus y is greater than or equal to negative 25. Okay, so then again, this is still a maximized problem. So I need to go ahead and write my tableau. So there's my first tableau. And if you look on page 323, it says, now you have to deal with these negative signs that are over here. You have two of them. You have to deal with one of them see what happens, and then see if another one shows up. Because maybe as you're working the problem, all of these negatives will go away. If they don't, you still have to deal with them. You cannot have a negative over here except for in your minimum maximum column. Okay, so I am dealing with this negative, and it really is going to be up to you as to which one you want to do. It doesn't matter to me. I know that if I deal with this negative 1 here to begin with, then it's going to give me a little bit less work on the problem. And I only know that because I've done this a little bit. And again, there's no trick to it. It's sort of just a matter of figuring out where it's going to take you and just go there. So how do I do this? I need to get rid of this negative 25. So you look in this row here, and you see if there are any other negative signs that you can use. So there are. So I'm going to divide this whole row by negative 1. Because when I divide this whole row by negative 1, that turns that into a positive 1. It also turns that into a positive 25. And while I'm at it, it turned everything else into a positive except for this one. So that's what I did here. From here to here, I divided by a negative. And that was to get rid of this particular negative here. And now I have to pivot because I've got this negative taken care of. I need to pivot, and I'm going to pivot on 60 divided by 3 is 20. Negative 24 divided by negative 2 is 12. 25 divided by 25. I'm going to pivot 25 divided by 21. This is the one that I decided, so this is the one that I pivot on. So it stays like it is, and then of course I take negative 3 times row 4, add it to row 1, and put it back in row 1. 2 times row 4, add it to row 2, and put it back in row 2. Negative 1 times row 4, add it to row 3, and put it back in row 3. 6 times row 4, add it to row 5, and put it back in row 5. And when I do that, I end up with this. Okay? And then I still have a negative. So now I have to deal with this negative. Looking in the row, there is still a negative here for me to use, so that I'm going to divide both this row by a negative 1. And that gives me this row. And now I need to pivot on that 1. And when I do that, then I end up with all these numbers in here. And again, we already know how to pivot from earlier in the chapter and from what we did in last chapter. So I go ahead and pivot, and it gives me all these values. Notice there are no negatives there, and there are no negatives here where I'm going to have to worry about my constraints. So what's my answer then? My maximum is 120. X value is 10. The Y value is 15. And I'm done with that problem. So again, on page 323, there's step-by-step procedures on how to set these up. There's step-by-step procedures on how to get rid of those negatives and when you know to get rid of the negatives. And there are about 10 or 11 pages of just examples to do, including word problems. So Each one of these takes a long time to sort of work out. Don't get frustrated by that. But then you need to be able to set it up correctly and to read the answer from your Tableau correctly. One more video and then we'll be done.